Okay, we are so happy we have Chris White from White Lab. What yeast you bring this time to Hong Kong? It seems a very special one.
Yes, it's the Franken blend yeast, and you're the first one to get this pro size. A few years ago, when we finished a DNA sequencing project, it was a big collaboration with people in the US and in Belgium. So we started with 96 yeast strains to fully sequence the DNA, and then it became 157 later on. But we took those original 96 yeast strains and made a beer out of it. And we thought, well, we should make a 9% stout. And we call that Franken Stout.
Yeah.
And then a few years go by, and for this for the Homebrew Con in Portland this year, we said, let's release it to homebrewers as just a little fun thing. So we packaged up a lot of that yeast, the Franken blend yeast. I brought a sample of it for you to make 200 liters of beer.
Yeah. So what's the characteristic of this yeast? It's a mix of 96 different kind of yeast.
Yeah. You know, I was really excited the first time I tried Franken Stout because as a yeast person, you know, what are these 96 yeast strains going to do? I didn't know if the beer was going to be bad, good, what it was going to be like. And so I came back from a trip. I'm always on different trips, talking to brewers and home brewers and things. And so came back, the beer was ready. I tried it. I just remember smiling. It's interesting. Dry, complex, a little bit of phenols, a little bit of other characters, such as wood characters. It tasted like the beer had been aged in oak.
Oh,
but it had never seen oak. It's just that complex microbiology. It's not just one pure strain, it's 96 pure strains. And so every batch we make is a little bit different because they grow differently, and we repitch the culture for a while and then save a little bit of that culture frozen. So someday we can go back and look at what happened to that population. The more we reuse the culture, the more the phenolic characteristics of the phenol positive strains take over. But usually the first batches tend to be a little less phenol. I don't know, it's quite unique. What are you going to make with it?
I want to make a black beer, of course. We are thinking about a stout or dark saison.
You might have to name it once you taste it.
Yeah, sure.
Does it taste more like a saison or more like a stout?
Yeah, that's good. So besides this yeast, you also bring the new product to Hong Kong this time, the London Fog NEIPA yeast, and also the M side for the Brut IPA.
Yeah.
So can you tell me more about this and tell the home brewer in Hong Kong, how can they apply those M side and NE yeast to the new style of IPA?
Yeah, I'll start with the IPAs, and it has taken over in popularity. Very, very popular now in the United States. Originally calling them New England IPAs or East Coast IPAs. Now the term hazy seems to be more common. The GABF put it, Great American Beer Festival, held in Denver every year, and that was a few weeks ago. For the first time, they put the hazy category in, and so they used the word hazy to describe it, or juicy, and it became the #1, the most entries. More than regular IPAs. The very first time they entered it. This means a lot of breweries are making hazy beers. This means a lot of people are drinking hazy beers. And so I like to talk to people. What do you like about hazy beers? And it's usually younger people getting into craft beer, and they describe the mouthfeel, the flavors. So brewers are constantly now trying to figure out how to make that style great. One of the ways you can do it is with yeast strains, because some yeast strains really add to that juicy character when you dry hop with them. Some strains form chains, like the Hefeweizen yeast, so they don't flocculate as much. And that would be an example with the oldest strain we've had for this category, which is WLP 008 East Coast Ale yeast. That's a strain that nobody wanted to buy before commercially because it didn't settle out, because it forms those chains like the wheat beer yeast. So that's still our brewers' favorites, because we have a small brewery in San Diego that we've been making beer since 2012 to kind of showcase what yeast tastes like. That's where we made the Franken Stout in. And then we added another strain. Now, 3 strains that people use for hazy beers are in our top 10. And that's amazing. So, because that means, again, a lot of people are making hazy beers for those strains to be in that top 10. And the London Fog was one we added because of that juicy character that people are really looking for. Those biotransformations that are still being figured out, what's happening with the yeast and the dry hopping at the early stage, when the yeast is still there,
Yeah.
it creates this burst of juicy
Yeah.
characteristics. And so I have people that say, oh, they love the London Fog, or they love the East Coast ale yeast. And then we also have Burlington ale yeast.
Yeah.
That's a little more sweet.
Yeah.
Because some people like that style to be sweeter. It's a really exciting style, and it came out of nowhere. So it's fun to see the brewers either complain about it or like it, because they're trying to make it for the customers. And then a new style that came out of nowhere also, and we'll see how popular it gets, is the Brut IPA, where you add enzyme, and we call our enzyme ultra-firm, that you add it to either the mash tun or the fermenter, or both. That's what we did with the beer we made. It basically removes all those unfermentable carbohydrates down to smaller pieces.
Yeah.
So the yeast can take the beer down to basically zero gravity.
Yeah.
And so you get something that's dry for flavor and body, but also dry hopped.
Yeah.
And they're delicious beers. Everybody's also kind of figuring it out and making them differently. If they just add the enzyme to the mash tun, they won't get to zero gravity usually, unless you do a prolonged mash.
Yeah.
So adding it to both is a nice way to really make sure that gravity comes down to zero, because I think that's important for the style. But really, this kind of brewing with enzyme has been around since the 1970s. That's where American light beer started, and Miller Lite was the first one. That beer, that kind of concept was originally made for diabetics, invented in Germany. So so there wouldn't be any extra carbohydrates in the beer, which just turn into sugar in our bodies.
Sure.
So that's where the whole light beer, movement started, and now craft brewers are applying it for more craft flavor.
In terms of the yeast supply, you also quite get close to the trend of the beer making in the industry, so you react quite fast.
Yes.
For example, when people trying to do some NEIPA, I think in 1 or 2 months you already have a new product come out under the NE category, and then you now have the Brut enzyme. Do you have any new thing like come out very soon, or is there any special yeast?
Yeah, we're always paying attention, and it helps having a brewery and brewers on our staff that say, hey, I want to make this.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just want to experiment with a new hop, and I say, okay, but is there a new yeast you want to try? But brewers love hops too. And so we pay attention, we love being part of the community. We talk to brewers all the time, and we try to react fast and supply the yeast and bacteria that people want. And this has happened throughout the history of White Labs. I remember Hefeweizen was the first kind of, ooh, wow, that's a great beer style in the 1990s. That breweries started saying, I want to make a Hefeweizen. So I started collecting Hefeweizen yeast. And then it went through different things, and then sour beers, of course, so we collected bacteria and wild yeast strains. And we built separate labs to make those cultures in. And then, style after style, saisons, very huge, but they seem to be lowering in popularity, replaced by the hazy beers at the moment. So we're paying attention, and we've got a little pipeline of R&D projects that, we'll see new strains come out of. But nothing's close enough to reveal just yet.
Yeah, great. So thank you for the tips and the information on how to use the yeast. And hopefully the yeast will be ready when you next time come to Hong Kong.
Well, great.
Yep.
I look forward to trying the beer.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.